Greetings, magical mages, spiritual sages, and all the listeners that have really honored me by joining in this podcast audience. This is the Age of the Mage, and this is episode 18. And I want to thank you all so very much for being here and being willing to step out on this new journey with me. So thank you. Today I'd like to ask, and I know I asked this in some prior podcasts, but why are we here? Why are we listening to this podcast? Why am I doing this podcast? Why am I speaking to you and reaching out to you? All of us will have different answers, I suppose, but for me, my reason for bringing this podcast to life and for connecting with each of you goes back to a vision I had many years ago that I used to refer to as the Great Gathering. And then after a few years, it became the Immortals Project. And now in today's time, we are known as modern masters. And it all stems back to this one vision about 23 years ago that I had some prior things occur that were significant enough for me to learn and to trust some of these visionary experiences I was having. And so when this one came along, I was dubious, but it was so powerful and so strong and stayed with me so much that I did eventually begin to see it working in my life, and I did accept the calling. And basically what this vision showed me was a time when those who are magically gifted or oriented and spiritually powerful will come together, will find one another, and will be able to affect our world in more significant ways than they might imagine. At the time, I used to call it that we will save the world, and that may very well still be the best way to describe it. But so I believe that those of us gathering, in my case to speak and in yours to listen, and soon we'll be interacting even more, those of us coming together share a resonance perhaps to the messages that I'm giving, and also feel that on some level you belong in this group of people that would like to contribute to the future of our human race, the future of our planet and our world, by using your magical and spiritual gifts and talents. So, given that, I'm going to make that assumption that those that are willing to subscribe and listen to the podcasts, I'm going to assume that this is basically true, that there is a resonance to the messages for you, and that you identify as one of the quote chosen, which I have explained in a prior podcast what that means, and that you are ready and eager and looking forward to developing your magical and spiritual skills even more, and really dedicating some time and energy to these things. And why would you do that? Well, again, it ties into your overall destiny and perhaps the calling that you may feel in your heart. Does the calling of wanting to help your fellow man and wanting to help others. And all this prompting and that we experience in our minds, our hearts, and in our psyches leads us to want to be better and leads us towards wanting to understand more and understand the truth and understand how to utilize our gifts. So given that we share that foundation and some of those ideas, I'd like to begin today with a podcast about, we've done a couple along these lines, but we're going to go back to this idea of know thyself. And today I'm going to introduce one of our modern masters kind of personality type systems and it's kind of fun. And we have a few, we have more than one. And why do we work through these systems? Well, all of you, I'm sure, are familiar with things like astrology, and it's interesting to find yourself in astrological descriptions, and we can use astrology. We can use numerology in similar ways. There are personality tests available, color, just all kinds of ways that we find intriguing, don't we? We like to take these quizzes and we like to figure ourselves out. And for this purpose, we're going to go a step beyond just the curiosity and the fun aspect of figuring ourselves out, because if we take a few of these steps that we have implemented inside of Modern Masters and the Immortals Project, you can actually get a better handle on your true spiritual and magical gifts. And so I guess that's where this really begins, is knowing that we want to use these gifts. What do we do? How do we start refining them, improving them, strengthening them? And truly, this goes back to understanding yourself so that you don't make the mistake of comparing yourself to others who may not even share your specific talents, gifts, or purpose. And we can get really hung up on saying, well, that person's doing it this way, that I need to do that. I mean, that's working over there. Because we don't want to do that. We need to be very careful and be willing to carve out our own individual paths so that even our techniques reflect our very specific and unique goals that tie directly into our destinies and our gifts. So fun ways to do this is to kind of zero in on who you are when it comes to magic, or when it comes to spirit, or when it comes to soul energy. So, as many of you know my story, I just burst out of the gates with a lot of gusto and excitement right after I received the first vision. Well, it took a few months, but then I really came out and I'm like, all right, I'm going to own this. I'm going to go for it. And I dove in, and we had some help and a little bit of a team going, and we launched a few ideas, and it was tough going. And I had some personal things set me back as well. And after about a year of attempting to launch the gathering, I had to pull back for a variety of reasons. And things just kind of hibernated along with me for a few years. I spent some time really doing some soul searching as well as research. I spent a great many hours researching various things and refining my own intuition and my own extrasensory gifts, and of course continuing to have phenomena that was supernatural or interdimensional happen to me during those years. And so when I raised my head again and began to relaunch the concepts behind the gathering, I got this download about soul lines, and this information came in that people carry soul lineage very similar to the way that they might carry physical DNA lineage. And I was like, wow, this is an interesting download. What's this going to turn into? And it grew into what we're going to talk about today, the 7 Immortal Soul Lines. And I am not claiming that this is a be-all, end-all category system that will define any one person perfectly, just as we all have characteristics of the various astrological signs. For example, we're going to find that we overlap with these soul lines as well, and nothing is cut and dry. We're very complex creatures, aren't we? But it is a very good starting point. It has proven to be, over many years working with people and talking and visiting and assessing each other about our soul lines, it has held up amazingly well. So what the concept is about these immortal soul lines is that, of course, our souls are eternal. or nearly eternal, and have emerged from a source and perhaps have made a journey through various types of incarnations and may even be associated with strongly with a certain kind of race, a certain species. As the soul evolved, it may have resonated more strongly to certain patterns. Therefore, it may have spent more time, so to speak, with certain beings. And this soul lineage may have acquired actual energy DNA through the exposure to our soul families and these prior lifetimes that we may not be aware of because we have forgotten in this incarnation. So it's kind of it just boils down to a soul lineage and describes, it's a way of describing where your natural gifts lie and what you find yourself gravitating to in this incarnation. And it's claiming, this system is kind of making the claim that your gifts are not an accident, that your inclinations in both magical and spiritual matters, you have actually absorbed through lineage, through spiritual lineage. So, what the download went on to specify with me, this information that came in, was that the 7 chakras that we're most familiar with, I know there are additional energy centers in the human and etheric bodies that we have, but the basic 7 that we're most familiar with are powerful energy centers for our physical existence. And because of that, our soul lineage shows up as heightened energy in one or more of those centers. Because, of course, the spirit background, the spiritual gift, is trying to grow and trying to emerge in our 3D plane. So you carry this very high dimensional set of spiritual gifts and magical tendencies, and yet it's trying to squeeze into this body that's a bit restricting. And also these gifts are trying to come out into this 3D world. And so they have natural affinities to one or more of these energetic power centers, vortices, that we have been historically referred to as the chakras. So we all have these 7 chakras, and there is an immortal soul line, so we call them, associated with each one of these chakras. So for this particular podcast, I'm just going to briefly go through the 7, and in the following couple of broadcasts, we're going to break them down and spend a bit more time on each one of them so that you can get a better idea about them. And it will be fun to see where you think your talents lie and why. Why do you think that? So let's start with the root chakra. This is found right at your seat. If you're sitting down, it's touching the chair that you're sitting on. And it also extends, the energy of this chakra extends down through your legs into your feet. And it is one of the most grounded chakras because indeed it does connect with the earth itself. And so it's the color that is associated most often with this chakra is a deep red. Now, this may shock you, but we do refer to this particular soul line associated with this chakra as the immortal vampire line. And the word vampire shouldn't scare anyone. I mean, of course, they can be scary, but in our case, we describe the vampire energy associated with this chakra as one of a transformative energy. In other words, those who carry this ancient lineage have the gift of being able to absorb life energy and sentient energy and transmute it, transform it, and then give it back to the person, give it to another being, or keep it for themselves. So again, we're going to go into this in much more detail, but because of certain legacies and dramas and fiction, we perceive the vampire usually as something very dark and negative, and it's truly not the case. Every one of these soul lines can be misaligned or misused because these are just powers. These are just gifts and talents. And we all know that any human gift or talent can be used for the light or used for the dark. So we must be careful not to jump at some of these labels and titles and just make the assumption that they're automatically good or bad. That is not the case. These are strictly powers that have come to a person, to you, through your soul's evolution and exposure to different ancient beings and ancient races, and picked up what you resonated most strongly to. So, bottom root chakra, red, and the immortal vampire line. The second chakra up from there is the sacral chakra. It's about where the womb would be on a woman, in the lower abdomen. And it is kind of the cradle, the crucible of creativity. We nurture things from this spot. We grow things from this spot in our energy bodies and energy systems. And we call this the eternal artisan soul line. And so the artisan, now this could be certainly someone who paints, dances, sings. There is a great need for the person who carries the eternal artisan soul line as their dominant soul line really thrives when they are creating. In fact, if they are not able to create and that's stifled for any reason, this person can struggle to even want to live. It is that we all might be creative, and of course we are, but for this, if this line is dominant in someone, it is life itself. Most of us could go, amount of time without feeling like we must create something. But for this line, that's not the case. The creation, any kind of creation, is deeply tied to their reason for being alive. And they do offer this bridge between their inspiration that they receive on what they want to create and then bringing it to the 3D world through some medium. Now, this can obviously be any of the creative arts, but it can also be people, for example, like architects and city planners, even engineering that create codes and plan buildings and plan cities. It can also be someone like who is a strong, just loves being a parent, for example, because this person is very drawn to creating children and then nurturing, training, and supporting those children. And that's their link to creation. It can be someone who is very drawn to pets and animals and adopts them and nurtures them. So it can show up in ways that you may not normally think of when you think of creativity and artistry, but it has the same elements. When you break it down and you really look closely, you're going to find the need for creation and the nurturing of that creation, and also the expression of it. And so these eternal artisans, they have a strong desire to share their creations, some on a more wide scale, worldwide, and others with friends and family. So it's not always a global event, but it definitely, the creation is made to be shared, ideally. All right, so next we move up to the third chakra. Oh, the color associated with the eternal artisan line is orange. Now, moving up to the third chakra, the golden deep yellow, brilliant gold light of the third chakra. And that's often called the solar plexus. And it's right around your belly button, perhaps a little bit higher. And in our soul line system, that particular chakra is aligned with the physical healers. And we call them the honored healers. These are people who seem to be able to heal living things, plants, animals, or humans, physically. In other words, they may be interested in a mode of healing, whether it's a physical laying on of hands or whether it's distant energy healing, but it centers around relieving other living beings of actual pain or disease that affects the physical body. Now, a lot of times healers are very aware that they can heal from early ages. They just have noticed from very early on that they had a positive effect on their pets or on their friends. And so this is a pretty obvious soul line for a lot of people when they're trying to run through these and say, who am I? What am I most closely associated with? The healer usually knows themselves. Now, they're very often drawn to, they look at different modes, different healing modes. Some who maybe aren't even as magically or spiritually inclined find themselves in fields of medicine all the time because their interest in healing others is so strong. But for the magical and spiritual person, you're going to find yourself drawn to forms like Reiki and Qigong and distance healing, energy healing, many of these types of alternative healing for the body. And yeah, pretty self-explanatory. Color is gold. And there's so much to go into with each line, and we'll get to that. We'll do that in the follow-up podcast. So let's move on for now, going up to the heart chakra, the fourth chakra, the body. And this color is associated with the color green. And this is in our system called the beloved priest and priestess soul line. So the archetype for this line is the Christ figure, perhaps the Buddha figure. It is the person, the avatar that it's related to the healing line just beneath it. But in this case, this person really feels compelled to help others heal emotionally or soothe others. You'll find these people very often are counselors. And if they're not formally a counselor, they are sought after by their friends and by associates because they find their friends find them very non-judgmental and willing to share some kind of burden with them by spending time and listening to the story that needs to be said before it can be healed. These people very often are good listeners, and they're very supportive, again, not judgmental, and they have a knack for letting people feel comfortable expressing emotion and things that are not healed in the emotional realm and need soothing and need calming and need healing. So the beloved priest and priestess is very compassionate and kind and is willing to share their spiritual energy with these people in order to see healing take place in the emotional realms and sometimes the mental emotional realms. All right, next one up. This one's associated with the throat chakra, and its color is royal blue, and it is sometimes referred to as the center of willpower in some chakra systems. We refer to this immortal soul line as the visionary messenger. So again, it's the speaking, it's the sharing of a message. It doesn't have to be spoken. It could be written. It could be one of these types of things. But how does the visionary messenger get the messages that they want to share? Well, in this magical spiritual system like this, the messenger receives messages maybe through dreams, through intuition, downloads, channeling, various ways, divination mechanisms. That's how the messages come in. And then there is a calling associated with, as with all the lines, that compels the messenger to share that message. So we might have some reluctant messengers, just as we could have reluctant healers, reluctant artists, We might have some that are resisting their people resist their gifts. It may take years for the messenger to gain enough confidence to actually share one of the messages. I know I've struggled with this, and so I can identify. But the message we see them at when we go online and we read books. We are very blessed with many messengers these days sharing their truths with us. And it's not that any one message can be the ultimate truth for all of us, but messages are, when you hear a message, something in that message is designed for you. It's not an accident that you've been attracted to the message. And so even if the entire message is not to your liking or something you cannot accept with, as a whole package, a part of it is probably meant for you. So messages are very significant and helpful. And we see the visionary messenger show up as mediums, again, as channels, as these types of people who can access extra dimensional messages and bring them to us here in the third dimension. The next chakra up is the brow chakra, or sometimes and often called the third eye. And this is associated with the color of indigo, very, very deep, deep blue, almost purple. And this chakra is, in our system, aligned with the mystical shaman. And the shaman, in our terminology, is someone who, first of all, might recognize their particular lineage through dreams. It's very, very common for a shaman to have dreams and want to express their dreams and share their dreams. And they start sensing, hey, this dream world of mine is about as real as my daylight world, or my waking world. So the dream state becomes very important to the shaman. And this, I believe, is because shaman are here to walk between worlds and visit other times, other realms, other dimensions. Now, they're different than the messenger. They may never be called to share what they learned there. This is not necessarily the case. But they do, nonetheless, absorb a great deal of wisdom in their travels between realms and between dimensions. And there's various ways that shamans choose to utilize their gifts. Some are healers, some are great healers, and they work with soul fragments and retrieving pieces of the soul that can get lost or become dim and not recognized by the living person. And shaman work in some very deep ways. Shaman also can be great warriors and do things in astral realms and other dimensions that greatly affect our 3D world here. So there's different ways for the shaman to express what they do, but basically they are kind of multidimensional travelers. And the last of the basic 7 chakras is called the crown chakra. It's at the top of the head, and it's associated with the color violet. And being at the top of the head, of course, whereas the root chakra that we associate with the vampire line is very grounded and very earthy and sensual and is deeply tied to the 5 senses and to the material world, not in a negative way at all, but just has a natural feeling for those things. The one at the top of the head, as you might imagine, excels at things of the intellect. And we call this line the Magi alchemist. And this particular soul seems to have a draw to intellectual pursuits, a great deal of reasoning and logic powers, and in magic seems to drift towards traditional magic systems, things that are almost scientific, and yet they are about magic, the occult, and the esoteric world and realms. And so they often follow traditions of magic, such as Hermetic philosophy, or things like mystery schools, Egyptian magic, Gnosticism, things that have a high reverence for mental acuity and also can be replicated through apprenticeship and through training and teaching, because this is so associated with higher orders of thinking. And after all, it is approaching that very next step up that takes us out of our bodies, and into the additional chakras that are in our etheric and astral bodies. So that's kind of the basic rundown of these 7 lines that we'll be talking about next. And we can see that the lower ones, like the healer, which is right in the center of the body, and the artisan and the vampire, these are lower centers, and they tend to be grounded, practical in some cases, very sensual, very interested in how to improve physicality, physical symptoms, physical issues. And then we have the 3 centers above the heart, which are the throat, the third eye, and the crown chakras. And those are very tied to the upper realms as far as how they do their magic or interact with their magical belief systems. And then the heart's right there in the middle. And so in a very healthy, functioning chakra system, of course, you have all of these various centers bright and brilliant and exchanging energy with each other through the heart. And so that heart is able to balance the mental with the physical and carry the unique emotions of the human race, within that heart chakra. So we see some generalities based on the location of the chakras, but they are all highly unique. And one thing that I have found over the years is I may change my approach to magic in that I may start out really preferring a certain tradition and having fun with it and investigating it and reading all about it. And maybe 10 years later, I find myself drifting to another system altogether, a different style of attraction. But what's interesting about soul lines is that no matter which tradition or new field I investigate when it comes to magic and spirit, I always want to use that the same way. It always comes back to my soul line and my general inclinations, the general way I want to use it, and the way I am able to use it, or where the natural gift shows up, keeps returning to my 2 primary soul lines. Now, in my case, I have found that they are the 4th chakra, which is the priest and priestess, and the 5th, which is the messenger line, hence the podcast, of course. But these are my 2 that I deal with in most cases. So as we go into these in more depth and review them, you'll probably find yourself in 1 or 2 of these. And how can we use this? Well, this gives us a great deal of information after we've moved through in more detail, after we've moved through all 7 of these. You'll be able to see, aha, that's why this works so well for me, and for the life of me, my friend can't do it at all. This starts it starts helping you see the ways in which you will naturally excel. What types of magic will naturally harmonize with your inherent gifts? And again, this may very well come from an association with ancient spiritual lineage. So that's the message for today, and we're going to move into these soul lines in depth, and I'm looking forward to it. And I will leave a link in the description that can take you directly to the soul line page on our website, modernmasters.org. And on that page, all 7 soul lines are listed. And then if you click on one and can read more about it, it will actually take you to a downloadable PDF link. And you are welcome to download any of that or read through those things, because we're going to be also starting a journal. And we're going to really spend our first our most serious first steps together on this magical journey, we're going to be spending it on know thyself. So we're going to be looking at kind of unique ways to, like these soul lines are, they're unique to us. And we're going to take some imaginative journeys into ourselves. And we'll probably want to journal a little bit of this and get some unique perspectives about ourselves and see what that can do for our progress in our spiritual work and understanding of ourselves, healing of ourselves, and our magical excellence. So that is why we're going to start now with this foundation and build from here and have some fun with it. Thank you so much for joining me again. I'm excited, and this will be great. Great experience we're all going to work through, and I hope you enjoy it as well. So I will be back soon with more information about soul lines. Bye for now.